Well, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us again. If you're watching this, you're obviously interested in and concerned about what's happening on Wye River Beach. So in the spirit of sharing information with the community so everyone's well informed about what's going on, today we have Oliver Nickson, who's the Coastal Planning and Projects Officer with the Great Ocean Road Coast and Parks Authority, which is the overseeing authority on this issue. Oliver, thanks for joining us.
Hi Zoe, thanks for having me.
Appreciate your time.
Yes.
Let's just get a sort of current update. We're recording this interview on Friday, the 23rd of July. Where are we at right now in terms of what's happening on the beach?
Yep. So as probably everyone who's down there at the minute knows, we've got some guys out there at the minute doing some sand scraping work. So they're moving sand from the western side of the river channel, trying to kind of nudge that channel to make it hug and kind of migrate a bit further forward towards the west. That sand that's being scraped is being put over the scarp to kind of build up that buffer. It's been done in the past. We've done it a couple of times. To try and protect the club, protect the vegetation and protect the caravan park there. We've also got some sandbags which will be delivered next week. They're big kind of geotextile bags. They weigh about a tonne, so they're specific for coastal kind of protection. These have been designed to go kind of too high by the consultant, and they're kind of an emergency stopgap that we're doing now, whilst the consultant is coming up with some medium to short-term works, which we're going to have 4 construction drawings of in about 4 weeks' time. And those drawings and that work there will kind of buy us time until that long-term adaptation work can be worked through. And we have it's not going to be done until next year. A long-term option could be implemented on site. There's a lot of work that has to go into that, community consultation and that kind of stuff. So yeah, the works at the moment are kind of just emergency works, probably next week with those sandbags, and this week the sand scrapings, emergency works. Then we're going to have some kind of more robust short to medium term works that will kind of hold up over 6 months to a year time frame following that.
Yeah, so I'll share some photos of the current situation so people can get some context around this. But in effect, what you're saying is that right now, sand is being scraped from other parts of the beach and placed adjacent to the caravan park, and sandbags will follow when they're ready. What's the objective of that work? Is it to try to change the direction of the river? Yeah,
so initially we're doing some sand scraping without kind of trying to shift the river at all. So we're just taking from a bit further kind of to the west of the beach, not near the river. So we've kind of changed the scope from advice from the consultant to, kind of take sand from the western bank of the river to try and kind of cut that out and kind of encourage the river to kind of align that way. And then we're also building up a big stockpile up near the caravan park. So that stockpile is kind of going to be quite high and quite wide. And as the river comes down and kind of hits that bank there next to the caravan park, that stockpile is hopefully going to encourage the river to kind of hit that and then again migrate a bit further to the west, while also as the river runs past, the sand's getting picked up off that big pile and hopefully kind of building up and getting deposited along that kind of scarped area as it gets pushed down from the river flow. So there's kind of, it has changed a bit the sand scraping scope like last week.
People will see from the photos, and also if they're down there or have been to Wye River of late, that the erosion has worsened, that we're starting to see that vegetation that's obviously quite critical to the dune structure coming down. Is that why we're now going to the sandbag option at the sort of critical property protection points around the dune there?
Yeah, so we've been following the kind of Marine and Coastal Act has a pathways-based approach where they kind of step through your adaptation actions from kind of minimal intervention to maximal intervention, I would say probably. And your maximal intervention is kind of putting a seawall there, and you've got all these kind of unintended consequences of doing that kind of work. So these works are kind of up on the kind of lower impact, more natural based method. So that kind of work is, that's kind of why we've gone down this path. But obviously after kind of last weekend and we saw it all kind of get washed away in one kind of, it was pretty much a riverine event, I kind of can see from kind of the flow coming through the river and just like the sediment getting pushed out from in front of the beach. We've engaged a consultant and we've just said we've got to reassess kind of this approach because it's not really kind of shoring up the dune. And as you say, it's kind of slowly encroaching in onto the surf club now. We're losing some mature vegetation. So it's kind of got to that point where we do need to kind of rethink and kind of pivot on what we're trying to implement on site to kind of buy us some time until we do have that short to medium term construction work done construction drawings done in 4 weeks.
Is it fair to say that this is a particularly complex case because you have the river and the estuary there and the sea? So you've got the Marine and Coastal Act and then all of the various stakeholder organisations who are responsible for management of both those sort of natural factors. Does that make it more complicated than it would otherwise be?
Yeah, so definitely. So as a coastal planner, most of my work's done kind of away from the marine component. So working on this project, there is definitely that added layer of complexity because we've got the Marine and Coastal Act for the coastal crown land, which is overseen by DELT. So they've got their policy there. And we've also got the Wye River and the river. So the CCMA oversee that. So it works on waterway permits required for any works kind of near the waterway or in the waterway. And then, you've got the Marine and Coastal Act consent required for any works on coastal crown land. So we've kind of got, I'd say, 2 hoops to jump through. But it just adds a layer of complexity when you're kind of working through these projects. Different organisations at the table. So everyone's kind of working well together, but there's definitely added complexity when you kind of add an extra layer of planning and policy over the top of the project.
So, there's lots of people who go to Wye River and have been going to Wye River for, a couple of generations. I mean, we have people in our club who've been going there for, 50, 60 years potentially. And, some of those people would say, well, why can't you just put an excavator into the river and dig it out and make it go where you want to go? Well, what are the limitations under the legislation, I guess is my question, to prevent that sort of action that might have happened in times past?
So that's kind of the Water Act, and that's overseen by the CCMA, that component. I'm not overly familiar with the Water Act and works on waterway permit. As I said before, most of my projects are kind of not in the marine environment. But from what I've gathered working with the CCMA on this is there's a lot of impacts that can happen, negative impacts of kind of undertaking these works. And they're well documented kind of in a lot of other different kind of case studies have happened where people have done these alignments and there's negative consequences in terms of erosion, maybe on the other side of the bank, erosion upstream. You've got fish kills, like changes to water quality, and there's all these factors that need to be kind of assessed and understood before you can go and kind of chuck a shovel in the ground and change that channel realignment. So it's kind of a risk averse approach in terms of, not a risk averse approach. Everyone wants to understand what could happen if we did that and don't kind of transfer a problem to another location. And there's also the kind of understanding if we actually did that, would it stay? Because if you go down to the beach, you can see that the western half of the beach has 3 to 4 times more sediment, and it's much higher than kind of eastern side in front of that scarp. So if we did kind of cut through and did that, and it's only lasts for a week, 2 weeks, and there's all these kind of risks associated with it, is it kind of worthwhile? So getting a consultant to undertake an investigation excuse me, to understand and what the impacts could be is kind of what's needed to be able to understand and prove and probably accept the risk that could happen. You need the information to do that. Otherwise, you can't just go in and do it unknowing, not knowing what's going to happen. So that's fair. That's kind of that.
Yeah. So take us through that consultant report process. I mean, as we're talking, it's evident that there's lots of factors. There's, and even from the previous interview that I did from our associate professor down at Deakin, things like wave heights, things like climate related impacts, things like, impact of bushfires and landslides upstream, development in the area, sedimentation in the river, there's a lot of things. So how does that consultant report process work? What are they kind of looking at? What's the time frame on some results from that? And then how will that be used to inform decision making for longer run strategy?
Yeah, so the consultants report, so they're kind of the main thing to get done first is just investigation into the riverine and coastal processes. So that's well underway. That's looking at, as you said before, changes in the bushfire, so the runoff from the bushfire catchment from the bushfires. We've got, the stream flow kind of past the surf club, any structures kind of in the river that might have impacted kind of flows that have been recently installed. Then there's the coastal processes, which again is another bit of work, looking at the sediment transport regime. And when you've got an interface of kind of the riverine and the coastal processes occurring, you've got kind of two systems working independently at either end, but where they meet, it makes it kind of really complex in terms of understanding what's going on. And so, I think one of the things that's been highlighted to me when talking with the consultant, in terms of just if we wanted to quickly just put a seawall in or something, that actually might lower the beach in front of kind of the surf club and the caravan park, and then actually kind of make the river hug that spot because it's got the lowest amount of sediment and it's the easiest kind of flow path out from the river up near the bridge going forward. So it's kind of understanding all those things and building up a good idea of what's going on. So that's kind of the first part, which is well underway. And then we've got the coastal hazard assessment. So that's kind of looking forward, as you said before, to those sea level rise, what's going to happen in the future, and taking into consideration over the 50-year time frame, 100-year time frame, what it could look like in terms of if there's a big storm event happening at Wye River, what the impacts. Do we want to put assets here? What kind of protection do we need if this will occur, for assets that are already there? So that's another component of the study. And then the final component is kind of bringing that all together and coming up with some viable long-term options. And then they're not selecting an option to do, neither are we, until we kind of have that kind of list of options. We've got the pros and cons of each option, and we'll bring those to the community. And that's kind of a big part of it, is getting the community's input, as they're the ones who love the beach, they live down there. That's probably the reason they do go on holiday there and have houses down there. It's just for the foreshore amenities. So there's a lot to unpack in those options, because as I said before, maybe if you put a hard structure that lowers the beach, you lose some beach amenities. So we do want to make informed choices and let the community be informed of kind of which way we go with that. In terms of timeframes on that, it was due in August, the report with the community consultation, but because we've started this short-term work where we're going to get short to medium-term kind of work, and we're going to have those full construction drawings in 4 weeks, that's pushed it out until October now. So it's a kind of 6-week, that kind of short-term work has focused the consultants' resources over to that, which has pushed out the long-term kind of adaptation planning. But as I said before, that's not going to be implemented. There's a detailed concept design and detailed design that needs to be done after we have done the consultation and come up and agree on an option. So that won't be implemented till probably after the peak summer period. So you don't want kind of excavators and everything on the beach during summer when there's lower risk of storms and lower wave energy, especially once we're going to have this kind of short to medium term solution in place over that time, which is going to be sufficient for that kind of time frame we're looking at until we can implement that long-term work.
Okay. And what's the process for community consultation and input then on those longer term solutions?
Yeah, so we're working with Delp on this project, and so they're going to put this onto EngageBit, which I think is their engagement website. So that, I don't know the timeframes about getting it up onto the website, but that is going to be the kind of main contact point for when we do the consultation. So if people are trying to kind of keep up to date on the project at the minute, that's kind of just following the Delp Facebook page, the Greater Wye Coast and Parks Authority Facebook page, and our social media channels, Instagram and other things like that. And that's kind of where we're pushing out the information as it comes to light, as well as emailing Surf Club, CFA, and everyone with our kind of fact sheets as they are produced with project updates. Yeah.
I think that, you know, one of the sort of burning questions in the community is what's the emergency strategy if this accelerates faster than we expect? And, you know, I think it's fair to say you and I have been talking about this now, but I think my first contact with GORCAPA was 3 months ago, and that the situation has really changed exponentially in that time. And, you know, there is a degree of frustration among some in the community sort of saying, why can't this move faster? Because you're seeing those dunes wash away before our eyes. What do we do if, you know, this consultation and consultants report is still in process and it gets substantially worse?
Yeah, so we are getting those sandbags out on site next week. So that is going to provide us some significant kind of bolstering of the protection of that dune system. So they're going to be about 1 metre high, and they weigh over a tonne. So there's 2 of them on top will be 1 metre high, and they weigh about over a tonne each. So they're going to provide some serious protection from, and definitely from the riverine kind of flooding and erosion that's occurring when that kind of flow is flowing past. In terms of if we had a big storm surge with waves coming over the top, that's not going to provide. It will provide some protection, but it's not going to be a complete 3 metre high seawall stopping any erosion at all. There's definitely progress in terms of the ability for that kind of system to be protected. And then, the works that are underway at the minute, that short to medium term work, that's definitely going to be factor all that in, and there'll be a much more kind of robust solution that will be able to withstand much higher kind of storm and wave impacts. So the emergency works that we're doing next week will definitely increase the protection a lot. And then once we get that kind of short to medium term kind of drawings in 4 weeks and then construction as soon as we can on that, that will definitely that will buy us the time until we can get that long-term adaptation. And then when you're talking long-term adaptation, you're designing to a 1 in 200, 1 in 100-year event. So the short-term works will definitely design up much higher than kind of what they're at with just 2 sandbags on the beach.
Yeah, and then I guess the other thing that's front of mind, particularly for people who use the surf club, is getting the surf club up and running for the season. So what's the position on that, and when will we, because it's a bit of a mess there at the moment, when will we sort of start seeing some remediation work just to make it safe and functional to use?
Yeah, so we've had a contractor out on site actually this week looking at kind of different options in terms of the ramp of what we can do to kind of have that open by the summer season, or the next Surf Life 7 Club season in October. So all agencies, Delp, CCMA and the Greater Wye Coast and Parks Authority are all on board to get that open and have committed to getting the surf club having access to the beach, be able to get their equipment down. And so that's kind of a big thing for everyone, and that will be done. So that's a commitment. We've had the contractor out. We're going to have some options. We're going to show those to the club, get their input, and then we'll progress from there. But in terms of implementing a solution, it's going to have to be informed by the kind of short-term works that will be designed in 4 weeks' time. So they're independent, but they have to kind of take into consideration each other. So the ramp has to take into consideration what the short-term works will be, so that we have a ramp in the right spot and doesn't impact the protection of the dune at all.
Well, Oliver, we appreciate your time. Oliver Nickson is the Coastal Planning and Projects Officer at the Great Ocean Road Coast and Parks Authority. Thanks for joining us, and no doubt we'll talk again.
Yeah, thanks, Zoe. Cheers.